Toni Erdmann, 2016 film written and directed by Maren Eid, partly based on the real life figure of her father. The movie is a mix of comedy and drama, and it's a film built on contrast. It tells the story of a rocky relationship between a father and a daughter. Winfried, the father, he's this older teacher at a local German school, and he's quite the colorful character. A practical joker, never serious, always making up the most outrageous stories he can think of, habitually just playing with people, habitually walking around with fake teeth in his pocket that he puts in. He invents ridiculous personas for himself in order to just make life a little brighter. The daughter, Ines, she's his polar opposite. She's working as a consultant at an oil corporation in Bucharest. She's this serious, cutthroat businesswoman, almost no personal life, always in a suit, always in a hurry, laser focused on her career. In the film, Winfried decides to visit Ines unannounced, initially just for the weekend, but he then ends up unexpectedly staying longer. And he basically begins stalking Ines and trying to insert himself into her professional life under a fake name, Toni Erdmann. Which, as you may imagine, is the last thing she wants or needs, this massive disruption and stress, all the while she's trying to finalize an important project for her at work. So, first of all, the movie stands on the shoulders of these two characters, and the way they're written and performed is just masterful. They're both interesting in their own ways. They're layered, complicated, and yet very believable, each in their own way. They are meant to contrast with one another, and yet we can sometimes see some similarities, some points of connection between them. There's one especially beautiful parallel in the movie where first there's a scene where Winfried leaves a party and he goes to his car to drive away while Ines follows him outside and just watches, unable to approach him. And then later on in the film, that scene is mirrored, it's reversed, with her leaving into a taxi and him trying to catch up with her, also unsuccessfully. And to me, that signified visually how they both kind of try to be better, try to improve the relationship, but they always fail in the end. The movie is also very, very funny. Right from the first scene, which introduces Winfried as a character, his absurd antics throughout the story made me burst out laughing many, many times. But here's a crucial thing. The movie is not a comedy straight up. I'd say it walks a very fine line between humor and drama. And the reason it succeeds at that is that the situations and dialogue and characters are undoubtedly funny and absurd, but from the point of view of the characters themselves, they're trying to be serious. They're really believing in what they're doing. There's truth in it. The director, in fact, she's spoken about how she wrote the characters and how she instructed the actors to try to play this straight, to not make it into a straight up comedy, but try to lean into the drama. And that's, I think, why it works. And that also means that the scenes where humor takes the backseat and the more serious drama takes the forefront, then it really makes it work on an emotional level because we believe those characters. Another point that I wanted to make is about the depiction of corporations. I think this is the single best and most faithful one I've seen put to screen because very often that will be like really exaggerated one way or the other. Clearly, filmmakers not being very familiar with that work environment. Here, there are literally scenes and dialogues and situations and people that I have myself experienced at work, like directly lifted out of real corporations. So they feel very real. And only around them, the exaggerated absurdity is built by inserting Winfried, who is just a complete outsider, like an alien in this environment. He tries to use his outrageous actions to kind of also point out how all these business people, from his perspective, are absurd, how they're full of themselves and how maybe life passes them by when they're not watching, and in the process trying to teach that lesson of living your life, of seeking out those moments to remember to his daughter instead of rushing towards money every single day. Bucharest and the Romanian people also felt very real and familiar to me, again, as someone who has been there and experienced this. So in ways, it was like the movie transported me into this world that I know, that I've been a part of. Now, the film is pretty long. It runs at over 2 hours and 40 minutes, but The pacing of it is excellent, and I was never once bored. I just really loved spending time with these characters, with these people, and watching their antics play out. And I was also wondering constantly where this father-daughter dynamic is eventually going to end up at. And I have to say, as I was watching it, I began seriously debating myself, like internally, whether or not it would maybe be a perfect 10 out of 10 film for me, because that's how much I liked it. And I felt you can make an argument for it, but I was thinking that the final judgment I should reserve until the ending, because maybe it just doesn't stick it. And then the film did something very similar to me that I once experienced while watching Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. It reaches a scene which feels like this amazing point, like the perfect point to end the story on. And I think to myself, if it ends on this scene, on this shot, if this is the last thing we see, I have no choice but to consider it perfect. And like in the case of Billboards, Toni Erdmann did cut to black at exactly the right, perfect moment. At a shot that serves as this wonderful, poignant ending, signaling perfectly well, without saying a word really, what exactly the character is thinking at that moment, which frame of mind they're in. Which in general is something that the film does very well. There's very little direct exposition through dialogue, and most of the stuff about who the characters are, what they do, what do they think, how they operate, we get from their actions, from their behavior, and from how the camera shows that. So all in all then, as I've already said, I do consider Toni Erdmann to be an excellent piece of cinema and the very rare perfect film for me. It passes my three personal criteria for me to give a movie a 10 out of 10 score. It's objectively well made all around, meaning the writing, the performances, the direction, cinematography, music, all these aspects are great. It leaves me thinking afterward. It stays with me and gives me something to consider, to think about. And finally, there's not a single thing about it that I would change to make it better. Toni Erdmann passes these three tests, and it's a terrific film.